Well, welcome Natural Resources class. This is the first video lecture I'm recording since you've had your exam, so trust that went well. We're going to be dealing today with land value. We've already talked a little bit about this. We talked about the value of land back in the forestry portion of the class. We were talking about land selling for $1.25 an acre back in the post-Civil War days, and which was about equivalent to the daily wage paid to a worker, forestry worker back at that time, and making the point that wouldn't we all love to get an acre of land for a day's work today? Of course, land values have changed quite a bit since then, and we're going to investigate that a little bit more. We've also talked about land a bit when we were in the being in the agriculture section. We looked at the costs of farming and considered the cost of purchasing land and making payments on it, or the cost of renting land, and both of those two aspects will come into play again today. But I thought, since we're talking about this in a movie that just is, kind of one of my favorites to watch from time to time, is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I thought we'd get a take on Delmar's view of land ownership. So let's see what Delmar has to say.
What about you, Delmar? What you gonna do with your share of that dough?
Gonna visit them foreclosing son of a guns down at the Indianola Savings and Loans. Slap that money on the barrelhead and buy back the family farm. You ain't no kind of man if you ain't got land.
Well, okay, Delmar. That's a view of it. Well, thinking a little bit more about this cost of land, what you're going to have to pay for it someday when you, or if you do decide to buy land. Let's just look at some sort of costs that you might incur out there. Here's a parcel of land. This is actually from 2018 now. This is a little more than, or a little less than, a third of an acre in Roseville, Minnesota, just a little bit south of here, that you could purchase and build your own home on. And if you did decide to purchase it, you would have to slap down $115,000 on that old barrelhead to get that parcel of land to build your house. If you think about that on a per acre basis, that's pretty close to $400,000, well, $350,000 to $400,000 per acre for land in an urban area. Wow. If we consider agricultural land, a number of you asked questions about that. Cole the Corn Star addressed the issue a bit. We addressed land costs a bit in the Minnesota situation. Just some average costs around the country, agricultural land, it varies from $2,000 to $20,000 an acre. The 20 would be on the high end, actually a little less than that. I have a friend that in 2012 said his cousin sold land near Cologne, which is just on the southwest side of the city, just off the southwest edge of the cities. He sold this good farmland for $18,000 an acre. Now just think about that. At that time, farmers were making a lot of money. Life was good. And what happens when life is good? Well, the price of things get driven up because people have money to spend. And this is a perfect example of that. That farmer bought that land at $18,000 an acre, assuming the price of corn would stay where it was for the time it took him to pay back that land, probably 30 years. Honestly, folks, what a foolish bet. Farmers don't always make the best choices. But, he was hopeful. I shouldn't say foolish because I've done foolish things too, but that was not wise. Of course, the prices have fallen. I wouldn't be surprised if he reneged on that, or defaulted on that loan if he loaned money for that. I don't know what happened, but that's what people can pay for agricultural land. And if you can imagine getting 200 bushels per acre of corn at less than $4 an acre, you're $4 a bushel, you're looking at $800 off that acre of land per year. To take away all the inputs, you don't have much of a land payment for that $18,000 that you paid for that acre of land initially. So right now that just won't work to pay that. But that's kind of on average gives you a range of what things cost. Not everywhere is ag land or urban land that expensive. and I thought I'd show you an example. This is Flagler, Colorado. So if you want to move to Colorado, they will give you land to move to Colorado. Now, you know, the deal is here, it's for industry or business, so you need to start up a business there. And I thought, well, you know, let's just go to Flagler, Colorado. I had another idea here. We'll have to come back to this one, but we'll go to Flagler, Colorado, because maybe you're interested. This is Colorado, after all. It's kind of neat, you know. And so what would it look like if you moved to Flagler, Colorado? Well, here's Flagler. It's right on I-70 right here. And so, oh, look at that darn crop circles, aliens everywhere. So let's just zoom in and look at Flagler. I think I can do that. Yes, I can. So here's Flagler, Colorado. We'll look at it from I-70. You probably have driven past Flagler, Colorado on your way out to Denver sometime. And if you did, I'll see if I can zoom around here a little bit. There's Flagler. Okay. Well, okay, so maybe it's you're not seeing maybe you're not seeing the mountains from here, but you know, you go a few miles down the road, and it really isn't that far down the road, and you can at least see the mountains. But this is that part of Colorado, the eastern part of Colorado. There's a lot of farmland there, and Flagler is it's an interesting town. It's not very large. We'll zoom out again. But if you wanted to begin a business, you could go to Flagler, and you could get land for free to move your business onto, or to start your business at. Okay, so that was poor sentence structure there. So there's Flagler, and if we'll just zoom out so you have an idea where it is relative to Denver. Well, here's Denver, here's Flagler. We'll do a little measuring here just for kicks and grins. So we'll do miles, we'll do a path. So if you wanted to go from Flagler to Denver area, you're looking at about 90 miles. So, you know, that's not terrible. But maybe you don't want to go to Flagler. Maybe that's just too far away from the mountains. So if we go back to that then, a little closer to home, you can go to St. Croix Falls, or Taylor's Falls. I'm sorry, I grew up in Wisconsin. So on the Wisconsin side, St. Croix Falls, never heard of Taylor's Falls. On the Minnesota side, Taylor's Falls, never heard of St. Croix Falls. Whatever. You go to Taylor's Falls, it's going to cost you $1, but they'll give you land there to build a business on. So even closer to town, closer to the cities, the same deal still exists. So people value land differently. They use it for different things, obviously, and all sorts of disputes can arise over land. I'm going to go to the place that I just had up there. I think it was yeah, there it is. Going to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I'm going to show you a picture, but there's a land dispute here. There's a historic district in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I'm going to zoom in on it just a little bit more here. And there was in Sioux Falls, if you build in this historic district here, there are specific regulations that you have to abide by. You can't build a house too high. You can't build it with certain dimensions. Its architectural design has to fit your neighboring houses. Isn't that interesting? You own the land, but you can't do what you want with it or on it. I grew up in the country, out in a small town, and you know, if you own land, you could do pretty much what you want with it. Most of the country is that way. This concept that others have the right to impose their will on what you do with your land is very much an urban suburban concept and very foreign to area-wise most of our country. But if you notice these two houses, here's one right here. This is a big newer house that was built, and this is an older house. And a land dispute arose, and I'll show you a picture of that exact situation. Okay, this is the McKenna Park District of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is an older house that was there. This is a newer house that was built, and there was a dispute that arose. It's only 7 feet away from this house. This original house was told it could no longer use a fireplace. Behind this tree here is a chimney. Because this house was built so high, you can't operate a chimney unless you've got enough space above it to get the smoke to go up. So they built this house. This family was told they couldn't continue to use their fireplace. Lots of other issues arose, and of course a lawsuit ensued. And I'll put this on Moodle so you can read more about it. Basically, the end of the story is that the couple that built this house was told by the Supreme Court, basically, tear it down. And I don't know where it's at today. That picture I showed you of Google Earth is from 2017. I knew of a person from Sioux Falls. They said that the current order and the expectation was that that brand new house was going to be torn down because it did not meet the specs for being in that part of Sioux Falls. Other parts of the world view land differently. In China, again, I'll put this on Moodle. China, little less concerned about people's property rights. They wanted to basically develop a larger consumer market, and so they were just basically going to tell several hundred million of their countrymen and women. See if there was a number here. 250 million to relocate to a mega city, and basically, if you didn't like it, tough. And they're trying to alter things very dramatically. They didn't really care about persons' property rights. You don't have much for property rights in a totalitarian country like China. Scotland's interesting. They have what's called the Scottish Outdoor Access Code. In that country, you can wander around anywhere. You have the right to responsibly access any land in the country. So there's no such thing as trespassing in Scotland. Now, you can't be driving your car over it, your dirt bike, go bombing around on it. If you want to walk on it, though, you can walk on it. You still got to know the local ordinances, but you've got to walk on it, or you've got the right to walk on it. In this country, growing up in a very rural area, it was common. I used to go hunting and wandering around the country in the woods all the time on who knows whose land. And it was very common. It's a little bit of an embittering thing. People, typically from the metro area, would come up to northern Wisconsin, buy land, and the first thing they would do when they bought land would be to slap no trespassing signs on. As a kid growing up, we didn't pay much attention to those. It became more of a game to see what we could get away with getting on those people's land. We thought we had the right to wander wherever we wanted to. So anyway, we view land differently, and we value land differently. And our Constitution specifically addresses how land is valued. And so if we look at it, this is the U.S. Constitution. This is on your Moodle page. Really, it's something we ought to be spending more time considering. But right here, Amendment 5 says, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." Now, implicit in that is that private property can be taken for public use with just compensation. I've had a number of students in this class prior to this year, and maybe there's somebody in this class this year that as a family has had land claimed by eminent domain, it's called, for public use. Maybe a power line was put in, a pipeline was put in, maybe a road was expanded, and maybe you didn't want to give up your property for that project. Well, guess what? The government's got the right to take that if it's for public use and if it justly compensates you. That's the big issue. Who determines just compensation? And that's a lot of lawsuits have come up over that. The question in our, well, anyway, let me go back to another one here. Our Minnesota Constitution. Right here, Section 13, private property for public use. Private property shall not be taken, destroyed, or damaged for public use without just compensation, therefore first paid or secured. In other words, the government's got to pay you money for your land before they can take it and use it for what they want. Again, it seems a little troubling. If we own it, we ought to be able to keep it. But the government does have the right to take it. Now, here's where the bite comes, where the rub comes. Even here in the cities, a few years back, a car dealership was taken down where 35W and 694, 494 cross on the south side of the cities. The government took a car dealership and gave that land to Best Buy to build its corporate headquarters. Now here we have an example of private property being taken for private use, not for public use. And that matter is currently in the Supreme Court. This is happening in other places around the country, and it does not seem to abide by our Constitution. Now, the argument is that that private property was taken and more jobs were created, so it was in the public's best interest to do that. I don't know, do you buy that or do you not? That's something we're working on in this country right now. Okay, so land evaluation. If you look at your notes, who sets land values? Well, they can be set by speculation. So if we go back here to the Roseville lot, how do you determine how much that lot is worth? Well, the owner's going to keep jacking up the price until they don't sell it, and then they'll back it off a little bit. So that's speculation. In fact, somebody might buy this piece of land and relist it for $130,000 in hopes they can sell it and make some money off it. So that would be speculation, speculative value. You might also have land valued based on what it can produce. So if we go back to, I don't even know if I've got it. Farmland, I just want a picture of farmland, but I think if I go here, we'll go to China, look up some Chinese farmland, if it will open. If you think about how much farmland is valued at, so here we got a picture of agriculture happening. It's valued based typically on what it can produce, how many bushels of whatever crop it can produce. And so, of course, you're going to have a smaller value placed on farmland because, as I made the case earlier, you just can't produce that much. And so the tax rates then are based on land's assessed value. Every county has a tax assessor, Zacchaeus, if you will, of our county. Not a very popular person, but they're going to base tax rates on what they think it's worth based on what nearby land has sold for, or is valued at currently, or has sold for. And so if you're a farmer and you own a piece of land, let's go back to Google Earth here. Let's zoom out just a little bit here from Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls is a fairly rapidly expanding city as people flee the taxes here in Minnesota and move to Sioux Falls. And so, you think about that. If you're a farmer and you're farming this land right on the edge of these subdevelopments, and you're paying a property tax based on what it can produce, and then all of a sudden people start buying lots and putting houses on them and charging $100,000 a lot, all of a sudden the value of your land has gone up, but the property taxes you have to pay on it go up. In fact, they can go up so dramatically that you can't afford the land anymore. You can't afford to pay the taxes on it. Hopefully that makes sense, folks. Again, if you're a farmer and you own this land, and nearby land is subdivided and sold, your property tax values are based on your neighbor's land, what it's sold for, what it's worth. If this land sells for $300,000 an acre, and you're currently paying property tax based on $5,000 an acre, can you imagine what that would do to your property tax value? Now, these people don't care because that's the average. That's what everybody's paying. This person cares a lot because they're going to be driven out of business. This is one person. This is hundreds of people. Who cares about what this one person says? Well, hopefully you will, because you as a result of this class, because you know the value of agriculture, and hopefully just the right and wrongness of it will make some sense. Well, this isn't lost on our country, and so the government in places comes up with solutions to this. Now, property taxes, the tax assessor is a county position typically, but the state also wants its share of your property taxes, as does the local school district and the local cities and towns. Everybody wants their money. So property taxes isn't typically a federal issue, but it is a state, county, and local issue. So who do you go to then to seek a solution to this problem. And what solutions have been offered? Well, in the metro area, in many counties around in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, around the country, there are minimum lot size restrictions. So if the land next to this farm is going to get, this farm here is going to get subdivided, say this piece right here, and Sioux Falls says, you know what, we don't want Sioux Falls creeping ever farther into farmland, they might say, rather than, like here in this subdivision, the minimum lot size might be 1/4 of an acre, over here they might make it 5 acres or 10 acres. That's going to reduce the demand to subdivide the desire to subdivide this land. Around Eau Claire, Wisconsin, there are different bands. I think there's a 5 or 10 acre minimum, and I think there's even a 40 acre minimum the farther you get away from Eau Claire. And that's an attempt to retain farmland in that very productive part of the country. Another thing that's very common is zoning. So every county, not every, some counties, many counties have a zoning board, and they will set zoning so that you can't build a house here if this is zoned agricultural. So if this land is zoned agricultural, this land is zoned residential, everybody's happy. And that means the value of this land won't go up because it can't be subdivided. So zoning is a way that happens. But you can always apply for a variance to zoning. When Bethel built the Great Hall, I believe there was a zoning restriction that prevented it from being built that close to Lake Valentine. So what did Bethel do? They went to the governing board and applied for a variance and received it. A variance is a permission to violate zoning requirements. And so there are ways around that. And other people argue, don't do anything. Let the market decide. If this farm is too close to the city and the values go up too high, this person might want to farm. Maybe they're not meant to farm. Don't feel real bad for them because they're going to sell their land and become a millionaire. They just won't be able to farm it anymore. And maybe it was a generational farm and that will be lost. So some would argue that's a solution to the problem as well. At any rate, this issue of land is a big deal. We've talked about it some before. It will come up again. And I just thought I would look at those issues, and I'll link those items that I mentioned that I would in Moodle, and you have a good day.